Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Proxy. My name is Phil Morse, and I'm here to be your proxy by asking my guest questions that you may have regarding our topic. You can submit questions as well in the chat, and then after we have having our conversation, you can form your thoughts, and because you have an examined opinion that leads to discernment. On this episode, I have Adam Monroe here from Consumers Energy. He is the hydro dam executive director, or hydroelectricity executive director from Consumers Energy. Did I get that right?
Hydro generation, executive director of hydro generation.
Perfect. Thank you. And he's going to be sharing his perspective on the dams that are the 13 dams in the state of Michigan that they're considering what they need to do with looking forward in the future. So thank you for being on my podcast. Please know that I try to think of questions that people who don't necessarily agree with, a certain perspective, and maybe even there's some things with your perspective or your guys' stance, the consumer stance, and what you might have. It doesn't mean that I endorse or oppose what what you say. It also doesn't mean that these are necessarily my questions. I'm playing a role. So and my role is to be a proxy. To my guests, to my audience, make sure that you subscribe and click the little notification button so you can get the notification next time. We had 21 new subscribers since last week in the CatchMark Arts and Culture channel, and so I hope that we can triple that. That would be wonderful. Please know that I try to think of, I can only learn so much about the topic being covered. There may be some of you in the audience who can formulate great questions for me to ask our guest. And if it's a reasonable question and we have time, I will ask for it. So again, there's the chat in the YouTube video that you can participate with. My hope is to build bridges and to tear down walls. So let's get started, Adam. Can you give us a little background about your professional history and what gives you credibility to be able to answer questions about hydro dams?
Thanks, Phil.
Hydroelectricity.
I'm glad to be here today. So my background, I'm a registered professional engineer with the state of Michigan. Civil engineering is my background. I've been with Consumers Energy since 2006. I was the chief dam safety engineer for the company from 2007 through 2021. So been in our hydro team since 2007. And then most recently, the executive director for hydro generation since 2021.
Okay, awesome. Now, the Consumer's website says that you are partaking in a detailed review of your 13 river hydro plants, which will help you choose the best path forward. But before we get to that specific, let's just take a look at the energy portfolio breakdown for consumers. So let's talk about the state of Michigan specifically. What are the different forms of energy that provide electricity in our state? And give us an approximate breakdown of what percentage each one provides.
Yep. So we have multiple types of generation that we do use. So the first would be coal, which is about 51% of our generation. Next would be gas generation. So that's about 32%.
That's natural gas?
Natural gas. And then we have wind, which comes in around 9%. And then hydro is just over 1%. And then a very small percentage, less than 1%, would be solar.
Okay. So thank you for that. Now, has the efficiency levels changed for hydro dams over their lifespan? Do they change?
They have. So our hydro dams were initially built as peaking plants. And so what that is they would run very hard during the day when there's a large demand for electricity. And then we'd let the river or the reservoir fill up overnight, basically allowing us to store that energy. And with the Clean Water Act, environmental concerns back in the early 90s when we were licensed, our dams are licensed with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We were able to basically, we went away from peaking to more of a run a river type of flow. And so what that does is it mimics more natural river flow. It's better for the environment. We really are environmental stewards in going through that. But the dams themselves were not built to run that way. They were meant to, run at much higher flow rates, not the normal day-to-day, every hour flow rate or how much water is going down the river. So they do run at a lower efficiency rate.
Like how much lower would you say? Do you have an estimate?
I don't have an estimate right off the top of my head, but we're running, the wicket gates or how much water going through, we're about 60% capacity versus if we were peaking, you'd be running in the upper 90%.
Okay, so that gives us some information. So if those people that lived on the reservoirs and on the lakes, would they see the water actually rise and fall? At night it would rise, and then in the morning it would be lower?
They would. Yep.
That's
So they
interesting.
would see it'd be multiple feet back in the day and prior to 92. And that we'd have like a minimum flow that we required. So at night when we were refilling the reservoirs, we'd go down to what we'd call a minimum flow. So just enough water to maintain some water in the rivers while the reservoirs filled back up.
Interesting. Okay. So what is your response? You know what? We're going to stick with hydro dams and hydroelectricity specifically. So now your website says for each plant, there are several potential results. It could lead to a renewal of your operating license for 30 more years. It could possibly lead to replacing or removal of the plant. It could lead to transferring ownership. And during each review, we will be looking at the following: safety, complying with regulations, community, cost of operation, you probably know this by heart, environment, and recreation. So let's look at each one of these elements to review. What are your considerations in these areas? You said safety. So what are you guys looking at when you talk about safety?
Yep. So safety is paramount. That is our number one priority with our dams. And that's really preventing a dam failure and protecting the public that lives downstream of our dams, preventing, similar to what happened in Midland. That is our top priority. We are going to keep these dams safe and make the investments necessary to keep them safe.
Okay. And most people are pretty familiar with what happened to Midland, but in case you're not familiar, there was a dam in Midland that breached, right? It was a 12-inch rain or something like that, and ended up. Tell us a little bit more about what happened.
So it just ended up being a failure during a flood event of the Edenville Dam over on the Tibbetawasi River.
What does that mean that it's a failure?
So it was a release of the reservoir. So you have all the water that is in the lake or the reservoir upstream of the dam. The dam was compromised or failed, and all that water was able to wash downstream, creating a flood event for the cities and the residents that live downstream of those facilities.
So there's property damage, potentially injury. Were there any injuries?
Not that I was aware of. But.
I didn't think so either. How about complying with regulations? Tell us about that consideration.
Yep. So regulations, we are regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And what that does is they license us to use the waters of the state of Michigan to generate hydroelectricity. So as a part of that, they regulate the dam safety. We do the inspections, projects to meet the dam safety requirements. And then we have what we call the Department of Hydropower Administration and Compliance. They're looking at more like water quality, environmental standards, making sure like with our operation today that we maintain river flows, maintain our water levels, minimize the impact to the river system as a whole.
Okay. And how about community?
So the community, we do provide recreation at our facilities. For instance, we have the Dragon Trail at Hardy, which is just a great opportunity for those that have not had an opportunity to go there. Mountain biking, hiking trail around the Hardy Reservoir. But we do provide recreation. The FERC does regulate that. There's campgrounds, boat launches. There's lots of opportunities to get out and enjoy the natural resources.
Can you? So while we continue the conversation, can you get that one slide up? So we're gonna have a slide here of the 13 hydro river dams that we're talking about here. Is there anything you want to say about while we have the map up?
Yep. So I can go through. We have the 13 river hydros on 5 river systems. They do account for about 50 megawatts on any given day. And like I talked about the efficiency changes or how we used to operate them, they were originally rated for 131 megawatts, but of that 131, we only get about 50 megawatts a day. And that was due to the environmental changes that we made, and our goal to have the environmental stewards for the rivers and protecting the environment.
So the changes that you had in 92, that's essentially what you mean, that's when the environmental impacts, you guys started considering that more, and that's when the efficiency went down.
Yep, really through the Clean Water Act and our goal of being good stewards to the environment.
Okay. All right, so let's go back to the list. So cost of operation, what's your consideration in that area?
So cost of operations, we have 2 types of costs that we have. We have our normal operations costs. So that would be, our operators, maintenance workers, our staff to keep the dam in good shape, running order. And that about offsets of what we have coming in for the power that we generate. So we offset our operations costs with with how much we reproduce from power. And then we have what we call our capital investments. So from there, that is our large dam safety projects. For instance, we have the Hardy Spillway. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but we are in the process of replacing a large concrete spillway. And what that does is allows water to bypass the dam in the event we cannot get it through our generating units. So the FERC, or the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, they require us to be able to pass what they call probable maximum flood. And so to be able to do that, we do need to go in and we are going to make modifications and replace the spillway. The spillway is, north of $300 million in the investment that we're making there.
Wow.
And, over the average for our hydros over the next 5 years, we're about $165 million a year for investments.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what the spillway is?
Yep. So the spillway, it's basically a large concrete chute. The water were to come up in the reservoir, so it would exceed what we're able to get through our powerhouse, or our primary way of passing water. So the reservoir would come up to an elevation where it would basically overtop that concrete section of the dam. It would go down that spillway and safely return to the river downstream.
Okay, so it's an overfill, essentially, right? That's a mark.
Yep. Yeah. So it would just basically overflows. It hits there, and then it bypasses the dam, and then gets back to the river.
Okay. Environment. What are your considerations with that?
Yep. So the environment, there's a number of items. First, we have the invasive species barrier. So our dams, the furthest downstream, they are invasive species barriers. So they keep things like lamprey from coming upstream. Also from potential some of the migratory fish getting up into some of the natural fish habitat, like brook trout upstream of Tippy Dam. We have bats. We have the bats that live in the hibernaculum in the Tippy Spillway. So the Tippy Spillway is a hollow structure, and the bats actually use that to hibernate through the winter. It is the largest bat hibernaculum in Lower Michigan, and it's something that we're working very closely with the natural resources to make sure we protect those bats, because it's working. They have what's called the white nose syndrome. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all, but it's a syndrome that's really significantly impacting the bats within the state of Michigan and across the country. And Tippy is one of the few locations where the white nose syndrome is not impacting the bats as it is, say, at other places like coal mines or up in the Upper Peninsula with the mines up there, where it is impacting and actually killing the bats. The bats are having a great success rate hibernating at the Tippy Spillway.
Now, somebody told me that there's endangered bats that stay there at the Tippy Dam.
Yep. So we have the Indiana bat, which has been found. It's an endangered species. And then we also have multiple other types of bats from Michigan that also use it as a hibernaculum.
Huh. Okay, how about recreation? That's the last thing on you guys' list of things you're reviewing.
Yep.
That you're looking at.
So I know I touched on recreation along with the community. I always put two together there, but I'm actually going to go back and talk more about community, because I touched more on the recreational part there. But the communities is what the value these hydros bring to the communities. With our company, we have our triple bottom line, people, planet, and Michigan's prosperity, and really looking at the people and the communities that have built up around our hydros. You have stores, gas station, hotels, campgrounds, all of that. For the people that come and recreate those sites, and they've built up and they're here, because of our hydro sites that are built there.
Well, of all the concerns that I've heard, that's the biggest one, and we'll get into that in a little more. So what is the likelihood of removal of these dams? Well, first of all, the removal of these dams, if that happens, is it one size fits all? Is it going to be all 13, or are you guys going to go case-by-case basis?
It is a case-by-case basis. We're going to look at each hydro individually. We're still in the process. We've went through our community engagement that we went last fall, going to all the 25 communities. Now we're in the process of doing an economic study along with our independent consultant, public sector consultants. We're out gauging the communities and trying to gauge what is that economic impact for the communities that the hydros have.
And that's a consideration of you guys when determining what to do with the dams.
Yep. Yeah, and it's not just an economic decision that we have. I mean, it's not just straight power generation versus the cost of the hydros. It is the communities that we are a part of. It's just such a large part of our hydro operation and a very big part of the considerations as we go to make this decision on the future of the hydros.
So what would you say is the likelihood, back to my question, where it stands right now, of removal of So let's say just some of the bigger dams, like the Tippy and the Olden Pile and the one in Muskegon, no, the Muskegon River. What's that one called again? Croton.
Yep, we have to have Croton, Hardy, and Rogers on the Muskegon.
Yeah. So what would you say? I mean, what's the likelihood where it stands?
So right now,
of removal.
Yep. So right now, from a removal standpoint, we have not made that decision. So we're still in the point of gathering all of the information. I mean, I can't put a percentage on it right now. Really, I can confirm, no decision has been made, to going either direction.
You said you can confirm
that?
that?
I can't. Yeah, I can confirm have not made a decision.
Have you made a decision on any of the dams one of them is going to be, or a couple of them are going to be removed? Maybe the ones that would be lower impact to the community.
We have not.
Okay. How about transfer of ownership? What's the likelihood of that with these 13 dams? And I know it's case by case basis, but maybe just go into that.
I'll just talk a little bit what that transfer of ownership would look like. So there's a couple of options it could be. So first, we could sell the hydros to another power generation facility, what we call have like a purchase power agreement. So we would purchase the power from them. Another option would be potentially like turning it over to a community, similar to like with the Four Lakes Task Force over on the Tibbetawasi River. The local counties now own those facilities.
Okay.
And where they would take ownership, or it could be a public or a private group that comes in and wants to own the hydros. The biggest thing that goes in with that, though, is whoever takes these hydros on, we need to ensure safe operation of those. And so that would be a very big consideration as we look into that option, is making sure if there were to be a transfer of ownership, they can maintain safe levels and keep the public safe downstream of the hydros.
Would it be a possibility for any of them where just a group of people, or let's say the county, bought it but didn't actually use it for electricity, hydroelectricity, and just kept it shut down so they could have the reservoir?
Yep. So that would be an option. So there's what would happen then? They would go under state of Michigan regulations. So it would be non-power dams. The power generation equipment would be removed, and then it'd just be operated as this basically a level control structure like you'd see at maybe a smaller dam, golf courses, things like that. It'd just be a state of Michigan regulated hydro plant.
Okay. And just remember to our listeners here today, you can submit questions that you may have that you would like for me to ask of Adam right in the chat on the YouTube video. What does renewal look like?
Yep. So renewal.
And what are the chances of renewal?
Yep. So I would say, it's just as equal as the other chances as we work through that. But renewal would be continued operation that we are today. So our FERC licenses are up in 2034 for 11 of our facilities. And we would go in and seek that 30 to 50-year license and continue to operate them, maintain them as we do today.
With the from what it sounds like, the port efficiency down to 60%. That's what you said, right? Does that seem like the path that would be, the most economical path for consumers?
So what we would do if we were to continue this operation, say out to 50 years, out to 2084, we would look at are there opportunities to put new equipment in, more high efficient new technology, because then all of a sudden you're spreading that over another 50 years of operation and the additional power and efficiency that is gained.
Okay. I think I missed asking this earlier. How much does it cost a year to maintain, on average, the hydro dams in Michigan?
It's about $12 million for our operations, our normals budget, and then that's that $165 million.
We did talk about this. Right.
For the capital investments.
Okay. Yeah. My apologies.
No problem.
So besides the options mentioned, what are other options that you guys are looking at?
So the other option would be the fourth option that we are looking at would be an alternative structure. This may be like a lower head dam, something to help prevent like invasive species, keeping the sea lamb free from coming upstream, maybe lower water levels. Basically the water is the energy basically the concern would be if you had to have a failure. So if you were to have a smaller head dam or a shorter dam, you don't have that potential for the water, as great as potential for the water going downstream. So it might be something where the community comes in and wants to put in a smaller structure. We'd remove our facility and then they come back and have that smaller head dam.
So that would lower the sea level height of the reservoirs for people that live on the lakes. I just wonder how many people, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that'd be correct. Yep. So we would lower whoever, had the structure at that point in time, it would lower the actual lake level.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I just wonder how many people would, be supportive of that, just if they got a $2 million house on some reservoir and now they're 100 feet away from the lake instead of 30 feet away. I just wonder how they would feel about that.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the challenges in consideration. And we talk about the public meetings that we're at. We had over 1,700 people show up, and really a majority of that was in full support, of continued operation of our hydros.
Okay. So what are some of the more, you guys are looking at that creative way, but what are some of the more creative ways that you've heard at the public meetings and from different people in public to solve this problem of not having to remove the dams necessarily, but keep them, but still, the efficiency piece that you guys are looking at?
Yep. So I think, a lot of it is, it's either the communities themselves can take it on or basically remove the hydro portion of it and what they can do to keep it as just to keep their lake basically, but remove the hydro generation and some of the requirements that go along with that.
Okay. So if it was, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If it was merely a decision based on efficiency of consumers' resources, what would the solution be?
Sorry, would you be able to repeat that?
Yeah, if it's purely based on, if the decision is going to be based on efficiency, yep, and being good stewards of consumers' money, the capital and the funds that you guys have, what would the decision be?
Yep. So if it was purely based on just the power generation itself, there are much cheaper ways to get electricity for our customers. We would select a different source of energy.
So you'd remove them?
You would remove them in that case, or sell them, or one of the other alternative options. But the cost, it is a part of the equation. But you have to look at the community impact and all those other things we talked about, the environmental options, that make this such a big decision. And that's why we're out gathering all this information, so we really can make an informed decision going forward.
All right. There is an appearance that this conversation is a response to the failure of the Midland dams that we talked about earlier on the east side of the state. Is that an accurate assessment?
It is not. So this is really tied to relicensing of our projects that is coming up in 2034, and really deciding what is the long-term future for these hydros with the investments that we are making to keep the dams safe. We are trying to get our long-term plan set as a part of our future.
Okay. Can consumers simply just vacate the dams?
We cannot. So we have our FERC license. They require us to maintain those facilities, keep the public safe. We would have to go through what we would call a surrender process. So we would request the FERC to surrender our license. And then to do that, we have to have a plan approved on what the future of the hydro would be. So whether that be decommissioning, selling it, or transferring that license to someone else, we simply cannot just walk away.
Okay. So here's a challenge that wasn't created by you, yep, but you have to solve it. If the engineers and decision makers of 2023 could go back in time and talk to the engineers and decision makers when these dams were installed, in the 1930s?
Yep. So the range.
What would the conversation look like?
And we didn't touch on that, but the average age of our hydros is 106. Over 106 years old. The first plant, Rogers, came on in 1906. But I'd love first to go back and this,
what would that conversation look like?
Understand, really just, how amazing a feat that they were able to complete. You go into our hydro dams today, and a lot of it's the original equipment that's still operated from day one. And for someone, didn't have computers, didn't have modern machinery when they were building these facilities, to have something that's still running today. If we were to build something now, you would never expect to get 100 years worth of use out of it. I guess the one thing I would ask of them is just, in looking at the way it's operated, knowing now, if we would have had those different, the different turbines, in ways that how they're operated today is different than how they were operated from day one.
Would you tell them, please don't build these? This is a big pain in 2023.
No, I love hydros. Hydros is my background. My grandpa was a hydro operator. I'm up in Traverse City, and it's just, it's a great source of energy. And, I've been in hydro since 2007. So.
Yeah. Yeah, you were telling me a little bit about that. He was telling me just before we got started that he's loved and he's got roots from a long time ago, right? Of hydro dams. You want to maybe just give a little bit of information on what you said?
Yep. So my grandpa was a hydro operator for Traverse City Light and Power. I know he operated up on the Brown Bridge Dam. Lived in an operator house at one point in time. So just amazing history. And I guess even, speaking of that history, going through these community meetings, I was able to meet an operator from Hodenpile Dam that operated there and lived in the operator house. Just amazing to hear the stories, where he just lived at that facility. He was there as a couple of operators, and just the history of these sites and everything that's happened, since the first one came on in 1906.
Sure. So from what you have heard, people who support removal support it because why?
So a lot of it is the environmental side of it. So you have a couple of items with removal. First is just restoring the river, natural passageway, opening that up so you could take a boat or a canoe all the way from the headwaters all the way down to Lake Michigan or Lake Huron. Mm-hmm. The next item are the environmental side of things. So you have a couple of items for environmental. You have first dissolved oxygen. We have the more stagnant water, impacts dissolved oxygen, which can impact fish downstream of the hydros. And then water temperature is something that we're working really hard on. It's with the water, again, not flowing as fast as a natural river. That water does warm up, and coming out downstream of our facilities is warmer. And so that's something that has the potential to impact fish also.
How long does it take for the water to get to the temperature of the rest of the river after the dam? Like a mile?
Yeah, I'm not sure on that. I don't have the temperature of the flow data. We do watch it. One good thing, like our Hardy Dam. So Hardy has over 100 feet of water in it. So we actually cool the river. So what goes into Rogers Dam upstream of Hardy is actually colder coming out just because of that deeper water, cooler water that comes out of the facility.
Oh, I see. So the deeper water of the reservoir is what goes through,
yes.
not the top water.
Yep. Yeah. So it draws. We have a couple of intakes, but majority of the water we get from that 100 feet below the surface.
Okay. Now some people would argue, well, this is nice to be able to fish because you get more warmer fish, warmer water fish like bass and pike, and I know pike are good in the cold too. But so they got the fishing in the reservoir there. So you might have people. The trout fishermen arguing with the bass fishermen, in a way. Is any thoughts on that?
Yep, and that it is everybody has their preference. I mean, I love to fish and hunt and recreate, and everybody has what they like to fish. And one of the key topics going back to the community meetings was at Tippy Dam, and this hearing. The people, that the fishermen upstream that like to fish the brook trout and things like that. And then you have the steelhead and the salmon fishermen downstream. And, both of them are concerned, through this process and what that would do to their fishery, long term.
Mm-hmm. Hey, just one more quick reminder. You can, if you have a question, submit it here in the chat and we'll take a look at it. All right. From what you have heard, people who support keeping the dam support it because why? Majority of people.
Yep. The economic impact to the communities. Either if they have their house on the dam, or hey, this city is built up because of the dam. Our hydros, our team, is integrated right into those communities, and that is the overall support. Is hey, our towns are here because of the hydros. My house, my value of the house. It's just everything that these dams bring to the communities.
Yeah, tens of millions of dollars from what I was reading, tens of millions of dollars of economic impact, if not even more, during the summer months, especially some of these reservoirs. And then you got the person on one of the lakes that's got the $2 million home, and they're 50 feet from the lake, and they like that. If you decided to remove dams on reservoirs, let's say on that lake where where it's real well populated, I know some of them are more populated than others. Where it would have a significant economic impact, how would consumers justify that to those people?
So that's something we would have to work through, if that option is selected. So it would be a whole nother process where we'd go through and work with them and, what would be the future of that lake, the reservoir, the property underneath the water. That is something that'd have to be developed, if we were to select to go down the removal option.
Would there potentially be compensation? What would that look like?
Yeah, I can't comment just because I've never personally gone through a dam removal process, but those will all be things that would have to be considered and evaluated if the removal option was selected.
Okay. Is there an economic bright side to the removal of the dams, in your opinion?
Yep, there's pros and cons, with both options. I would say the bright side, and again, it's looking at Michigan and the affordable electric rates. And so, our customers, both residential and industrial, they pay more for hydro than other sources. And so, with that, it limits, potential businesses, things like that. We really goal to have affordable rates, for all of our customers. And with affordable rates, we're able to bring, more industry into the state of Michigan.
Okay. So if I was interviewing somebody next week sitting in that chair that you're in right now, and they are 100% against removal. They want you to renew the dams because of, let's say, just the economic impact, and they got their $2 million house on one of the lakes, the reservoirs. What question would you think would be a good question for me to ask that person?
Yep. So for me, it would be the same question I would ask for someone that wants the facilities removed. And it's really, what do these hydros mean to you? And, what, sorry about this. What viewpoint do you have? What value, the hydros bring or not bring to you, so we can get their input into our process. And it's just so important to understand both sides of the story so we can make an informed decision. No matter what the decision is for the hydro strategy, long-term or hydro future, it is going to be impactful to the community. And we really need to know both sides of the story, or both point of views, so we can make the right decision.
Yeah, because there would be, if there was removal in some of these, there would, as you know, there'd be some pretty upset people with their, with their livelihoods. And yeah, it's not an easy, I don't envy your position, the consumer's energy position. But hey, thanks for being here. I don't see any questions on the chat, so that's all I had for you today, Adam. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, absolutely. So in closing, I hope you join us next Thursday at 5:00. I will have a guest here from Oceana County Clerk's Office, the Deputy Clerk, Melanie Kuhn. I appreciate her coming, and she's going to talk about the election process and maybe even address some of the concerns that people have had over the last couple election seasons. And looking forward to what she has to say. I'm honored to be able to submit and ask questions on your behalf, and I hope that you submit questions next week to Melanie on the chat, and then I can ask those questions on your behalf because I am your proxy. I hope you subscribe and hit the notification button, and I hope that you build bridges and tear down walls. See you next time.